Hey guys, so it's Miss Savannah. So we are going to go into more detail about the energy flow through an ecosystem. So today we're going to talk about all those things that we talked about on our last video, but we're just going to go into more detail with food chains, food webs, energy pyramids, consumers, decomposers, herbivores, carnivores, omnivores, all that good stuff. Okay. So it's really important to know that all these food chains and food webs, it really starts with the sun, because the sun gives plants the energy and food that they need through photosynthesis. And photosynthesis is the chemical reaction by which green plants use water and carbon dioxide and lights from the sun to make glucose. And that's the energy that they get. And that energy is stored as sugar. So all of the food chain starts with the sun. And you can see here, the sun gives light to the plants and it gets water and carbon dioxide. It gives off oxygen into the air, like we talked about with the trees and other plants. The sugar is converted into starch, and it's stored food in other plants, parts of the plants. So organisms that can make glucose during photosynthesis are called producers, because they're producing oxygen, they're producing food for other animals. So producers use most of the energy they make for themselves, but the energy that is not used by the producers can be passed on to organisms that cannot make their own energy, and that's like animals, which we call consumers, because they're consuming what the producers are creating. So organisms that cannot make their own energy are consumers, so they have to find the energy from other things, like those plants that produce that food. Consumers that eat producers to get energy are primary consumers. These are also called herbivores. So they're primary consumers because they're going straight to the source of the producer. So we have an example right here, like in a food chain. So first over here, we have the sun. You can't see it, but the sun gives this producer, which is some corn. It gives that corn the energy and the food and the sugars that it needs. And then this locust eats this corn. So it's a primary consumer because it's going straight to the source of the producer. And then we have a secondary consumer, which we'll go into in just a little bit, that eats the locust. This lizard, as a secondary consumer, did not go straight to the producer to get its energy. And then we have a I cannot say this. Hold on one second. Okay, a tertiary consumer, which is a snake, because once again, it's not getting its energy straight from the producer. It's also not getting its energy straight from the primary consumer, but it's getting the food from the secondary consumer. So it's a tertiary consumer. We'll talk about that in a little bit. So most of the energy the primary consumer gets from the producer is used by the consumer. So that lizard got its energy from the corn, and most of that energy that the lizard got from the corn, it uses, but the consumer that eats another consumer for energy. So this lizard is going to eat the locust, and so that's what we call a secondary consumer. And it may be a carnivore or an omnivore, and it may be a predator or a scavenger. And so we really didn't talk about scavengers too much, but we will on this slide. So most of the energy the secondary consumer gets from the primary consumer is used by the secondary consumer. So a consumer that eats a consumer that already ate a consumer is called a tertiary consumer. So it may be a carnivore or an omnivore, and it may be a predator or a scavenger. So all the secondary consumer and the tertiary consumer, these are either carnivores or omnivores. They're not herbivores. So this locust is an herbivore. Consumers that eat producers and other consumers are called omnivores. So they're eating straight from the plant, but they're also eating other consumers like the locust. So omnivores eat plants and animals, and we talked about that on the last video. Consumers that hunt and kill other consumers are called predators. The animals that are hunted and killed are called prey. So this little mouse is the prey, and this vicious owl is the predator. So consumers that eat other consumers that are already dead are called scavengers. So they're just going out. They don't even want to try to hunt and go through all of that. They're just going to find something that's already dead, like roadkill, like a dead raccoon on the side of the road, and they're just going to go and scavenger and eat that. And so that's what we call scavengers. So there's predator, prey, and scavengers. The transfer of energy from sun to producer to primary consumer to secondary consumer to tertiary consumer can be shown in a food chain. So these trees are getting their energy from the sun. This bug is getting its energy from the trees. This frog is getting its energy from the bug, and this bird is getting its energy from the frog. But it all starts with the sun. There's a fly in here. So, and then we talked about food webs. So food webs are interconnected food chains. So it's a bunch of food chains put together. They show the feeding relationship in an ecosystem. And we went through one of these on our last video, but so we have the tree here, which this tree's energy started with the sun, and then this deer eats the tree, the squirrel eats the tree, we got a little spider here too. So this bird is eating the spider. So all of these are interconnected. We have grass over here. This grasshopper is eating the grass. This bunny is eating the grass, but then the owl is eating the bunny. So it's just all of these different diets just coming together. Another way of showing the transfer of energy in an ecosystem is the energy pyramid. And this is one thing we've not talked about. We've talked about food webs, food chains, but now we're going to talk about energy pyramids. So an energy pyramid shows that the amount of available energy decreases down the food chain. It takes a large number of producers to support a small number of primary consumers. So it takes a large number of primary consumers to support a small number of secondary consumers. And what I mean by that is that it's going to take a lot of grass to feed all of these little bunnies. And it's going to take a lot of little bunnies to feed these 3 snakes. And it's going to take like a good amount of snakes just to feed this one bird. Okay, so it takes a lot to feed when you go up the energy pyramid because the available energy decreases down the food chain. So during our energy pyramid, the higher we get on the energy pyramid, the less the energy and the more it takes to feed that animal. So producers, it takes a lot and you just go up and up and up. But as you go up, the energy is lost. And so that's about it for energy pyramids, food webs, food chains. The main things to remember, let me go back, is this little chart right here. So we've got a producer. This producer gets its energy from the sun through photosynthesis. And then next on the list is a primary consumer. And then the next is a secondary consumer. And then the next is a tertiary consumer. And then we also need to remember right here. So consumers that eat producers to get energy are the primary consumers. And so these are herbivores. But these secondary consumer and tertiary consumers, these can be carnivores or omnivores, and they may be predator or a scavenger. And like I said, a scavenger is something that eats something that's already dead, so it's scavenging for that meal. Okay, so if you guys have any questions, just let me know. If you want to pause this video on any of these slides to read back over to study, please do that. All right, thank you.